Okay, I'll just share an interesting thing. First of all, just want to wish a condolences, though there's no condolences yet, unfortunately, because there has not yet been a funeral. But Lou Katz passed away yesterday. Lou and Rita have been coming to the shir since the beginning, and unfortunately, Lou has been sick really much of the time, and yesterday passed away. I've known Lou for I don't even know how many years. Rita's parents were members of my shul. Lou and Rita were important members in the community in San Diego, and the levaya, the funeral, is going to be sometime today, and Mitzvah Shem will have a way maybe of notifying people, those that would like, also of what the shiva arrangements are going to be. Okay, I was, as we were just gathering, so I heard somebody say, and this is not a negative thing, it's actually a beautiful thing, but I heard somebody say, oh, there's only 5 people. So I want to tell you an interesting thing. When our shul was starting, so we had a daily minion. When it started, we had nothing. So some 35 years ago, we had there was no shul, there were no people. They hired a rabbi and then decided that from the rabbi they were going to then build a shul, and it was just fascinating. We had no daily menu. We were really just a Shabbos, and then we started with classes and we started to gather people. And there was a point where we had a minion. Minion started in a very interesting way, that there was a fellow that said, how can North Shul not have a minion? Most of the people were not religious. Most of the people were not even yet Bali Tshuva. They were just sort of culturally interested in Orthodox synagogue and learning a little more. So there weren't enough people to make a minion, but it didn't matter. So we said, okay, let's start a minion. So we started. The person who had the idea said, fine, let's start on Sunday. And that Saturday, the person came to me and said, I would love to come to the minion, but I'm not going to be able to go to Disneyland with my family tomorrow. And we'll try it again next week. So we tried again the next Sunday, and again Saturday. He came over to me and told me why I wasn't going to be able to be there. And then that happened the Saturday after, the Sunday after, the Sunday after. And the guy never showed up to the minion. But eventually, people started showing up together to daven. And it was 2 of us, 3 of us, 4 of us, 5 of us. And then we got to a point where there were mornings where we started to do it every morning. And there were mornings where we actually had a minion. That was like amazing to us. And so we started advertising that we have a minion, the daily minion. And of course, it's been out on OU publications and all around the country. So people would come on vacation in La Jolla and they would know that they could get a minion. It didn't mean we always had 10, but we had a minion in the morning. So it was one morning a guy comes, and a guy from New York, very religious fellow. And we have 6, we have 7, we have 8, we have 9, and that was it. We didn't get the number 10. Then towards the very end of davening, guy walks in a pair of jeans, flip-flops, a leather, like a leather cowboy hat, ripped up t-shirt. He was one of our regulars. He was a good guy, but he looked like he lived on the beach. He did really. He was actually a very famous surfer, and he became religious. He wasn't at that point yet fully religious, but he would come and came for Minion, and he's a California guy, so he saunters in. Dude, how's it going? It's like really relaxed. This guy comes over to me after davening, the visitor from New York, and he lets me have it. He says to me, "You advertise you have a minion?" Says, and he's saying with his Yiddish accent, das minion, and you don't have a minion, and blah, 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 blah. And the guy's letting me have it, that there's no minion. And then when the minion comes, look at that, a raggy person comes in, number 10, he walks in like he's walking to the beach. You're right, he actually is walking in like he's walking to the beach. And he says, and that's your minion? And I learned something incredibly important at that point. What I learned was, it really depends on your perspective. See, because for us, that day was actually a yontif, because we got a 10th guy. We were able to say Kaddish. We were able to say Baruch Hu. Wow, it's amazing. We got 10 guys. For this guy, he looks at it and he says, this is terrible. You could take the same thing and you can look at it and say, if it doesn't meet your expectations, it's no good. Or you can look at it and you can see, wow, this is really amazing. It was an attitude that I developed, especially when it came to giving shiurim, that when there are 5 people, there are 5 people that came to learn Torah. Holy schmoly. That's like amazing. Even if there were chairs set for 50, who cares? One day there'll be 50 there. You know, we once in Shalshudis, I'm sorry I'm running on, but I think it's just an important point to learn. We used to have Shalshudis. We didn't really have a shul. We rented space in a hotel. And for Shabbos, Friday night and Shabbos morning, we couldn't afford to do it Shabbos afternoon with Shalshudis. So we did that in my house. And it would be 2 or 3 guys that would come from Mincha and Shalshudis. And we ran the service as if it was a real service. You know, congregation rises, page 500. We announce pages in our shul. So, you know, congregation rises, page 502, you know, Ashrei. And we were running it as if there were 25 people in the room. So somebody once commented to me, like, you know, there's only 3 guys. I said, today there's only 3 guys. But you know what? If we treat these 3 people as if they're the most important people in the world, it'll turn into 4, it'll turn into 5, it'll turn into 6. So it's just a little perspective change. That's all. When you look at a room, you see 5 people that came to learn. You know, you can look at it and you can say, oh gosh, I wish there was more. And I wish there was more. But you can look at it and go, wow, isn't that awesome? Baruch Hashem, there are 5 people. And as my wife pointed out on the chat, there's now 12 people. It's a whole tribe. It's amazing. That's a Yud Beis Shvatim. It's 12 tribes. Okay, so I just wanted to share that perspective. I think that it's a very, very, very healthy perspective, and it lets you appreciate even when there are small crowds, even when there's not a lot of numbers. Every single number is important. Okay, we sort of laid a bomb yesterday. And the bomb was that in the beginning of this section of this section of 10 psukim, where Shlomo Melech is telling us to be careful of the pitfalls. You want to be beautiful, and you want to hit beauty. Right? That following your parents, following your traditions, following your history is going to make you beautiful. But there are pitfalls. And the reason that there are pitfalls, first, before I even talk to you, B'ni, you're my son. You're amazing. You're my child. I love you. And therefore I can tell you this. And therefore you'll be open to listening to this. And then we said the words, Im yifatucha chatoyim al tovei, that if sinners entice you, don't consent. So the question that we asked was, why would anybody want to entice anybody not to do a mitzvah? Why would anybody take that responsibility on themselves to try to convince anyone else that keeping mitzvahs is a bad thing? Well, there is a most amazing Rashi in Chumash. In Parshas Bechukosai, which is the curses that exist in the book of Vayikra, where the Torah begins in Bechukosai Telechu, if you walk in my ways, and you keep my commandments, and you do them, I will give rain in its time. I will give you all the blessings that you can imagine. The land of Israel is going to flourish. You're going to be able to be successful against your enemies. Every possible blessing that you could receive, when you set the conditions of the world perfectly, it's all going to happen to you. And then the Torah says, "V'im lo sishmuli," if you don't listen to me. V'lo sasu es kol hamitzvos, when you don't do all these mitzvos. V'im b'chukosei timasu, and if you despise my ways. V'im mishpatai tigal nafshechem, and you are revulsed by my mishpatim, by my laws. Levilti asos kol mitzvosai, with not doing any of my mitzvos. Lahafrechem is brisi, and to go against my covenant. Afani says I'm going to do this to you also. There were 7 sins that were listed, and there are 7 stages of suffering that the Jewish people are going to go through that are then listed in the Torah. The Chazan lowers his voice. He reads this section quickly because this section is a section of incredible pain, of incredible suffering of what's going to happen to the Jewish people. In all of this, Rashi says something incredible. Rashi says that Harei Sheva Averos, there are 7 transgressions that are listed here. This is the Rashi in verse 15. The part of the verse where it says, L'hafrechem is brisi, you're going to go against, deny my covenant. Rashi says, and Rashi explains before that, each one of these, and my commandments you're not going to keep, you're not going to walk in my ways, each one of them is another transgression. So Rashi says, Harei Sheva averos. There are 7 transgressions that are listed here that are going to give rise to the 7 stages of suffering the Jewish nation is going to do. But harishona goreres hashniya. The first one is going to cause the second one. And v'chein ad hashviyas, until the 7th. V'eluhein, meaning that these 7 are a progression. How does it begin? Lo lomad. Person doesn't learn. Person's closed to learning, doesn't look at the world and learn lessons from the world, is not open, stuck in their ways, stuck in the way they perceive things, stuck in their understandings. And what happens when you're not learning? You're not growing. Loy asa. You stop doing. Because if you're not constantly learning and deepening the things that you do, eventually what happens is the things that you do become weaker and weaker. You know, as a person ages, very often, unless they are engaged in learning, then what happens, they're tied to mitzvahs, they're tied to many of the things they do, actually becomes weaker and weaker as time goes on. What happens when you're not growing? You're not bringing in new perceptions, you're not bringing in new excitements, new feelings, new understandings, deeper understandings. You know, you look at a child, one of the pitfalls of Jewish education is that very often, especially in small town Jewish education, so what happens is that there is no real curriculum. So a child learns about Pesach in 1st grade, and then a child learns about Pesach in 2nd grade. And there is really no difference in what they're learning in 2nd grade than what they learned in 1st grade. And then their 5th grade teacher does exactly the same thing. Could be maybe with a few less crayons, but with exactly the same depth or lack of depth. They are taught exactly the same thing. You talk to a 9th grader, and there maybe they've gotten just a tinge little more, but really they're getting the same thing. Because they're not deepening. And if you're not deepening, then it doesn't get any more exciting or any better. You know, when Esau was fighting with Yaakov, we spoke about that the Torah uses the word for their fight as vayiyavik ishimo, that they fought, they dusted with each other. The fighting is termed in the word dust, because what Esau realized was he's never going to beat Yaakov. He's not going to be able to knock him off completely. But what he can do is he can put dust all over what he does. He can just make it old. He can make it shabby. He can make it lackluster. And that's what happens when lo lamad, when you're not learning. So then lo asa, you're not going to continue doing because there's no excitement to it. There's no fire to it. Okay, so that in itself is like really horrific. That's a terrible state for a person to be in. But it can't end there. Because what happens if you used to be up here, you used to be so careful with kashrus and so careful with Shabbos and so careful with this and so careful with that. And now you're holding in a place where you're not. Well, you start to look around the people around you that are lamad and are asa, that are learning and are doing and are growing, and they're so excited and on fire with what they're doing. There was once a person that stood up. The person was born religious. He stood up in front of a dinner of 1,000 people that were there to celebrate an organization of Kira V'chokim, an organization that was bringing Torah Judaism to those that weren't brought up with it. And he looked at it and he said, he looks out at the crowd and he says, I hate Bali Tshuva. Yeah, it's not really the right thing to say in a room filled with Bali Tshuva, right? With people that did not grow up religious, that have become religious. Not really the greatest thing to say. He went on to explain what he meant because they push him, they motivate him. You know, he says, I come Friday night to my table. All I want to do, I've been working hard all week. I just want to get through the meal and I want to go to sleep. And they're sitting there saying, oh, can we have another Divar Torah? Let's sing some more Zemirot. Let's have another song. And he's looking at it going, will you stop it already? Let's just bench and go to sleep. And then he says, I start to talk about things that were going on in the week. And one of them will look at me and say, don't you think that might be Lashon Hara? And he says, I hate Bali Tshuva because they are Mechayev us. You know, there's an incredible line about converts in the Talmud. The converts in the Talmud tells us that converts are to the Jewish people like a sapachas. Sapachas means some kind of like skin disease. Really? That's not the way we relate to converts. We relate to a convert that converted a person that converted totally l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, we look at them as being amazing. We look at them as being total Jews. We don't call a person a convert. We don't call a person a Jew by choice. We're not allowed to say words like that. We're not allowed to remind somebody that they were once a convert. So why do we say they're like a sapachas? They're like some kind of disease, some kind of skin disease for us. Because they cause us pain. Because a convert, you look sometimes at a convert and how excited they are about keeping mitzvahs, how every Shabbos is like an amazing thing, how every yontif is something that is so, it is so incredible to them. They look at every chance to do a mitzvah as being an incredible opportunity. And sometimes we who have been brought up with this, we have been doing this for a long time, don't necessarily feel that same kind of enthusiasm and that same kind of excitement. And it causes us pain, like a disease causes us pain. How do you deal with that pain? Either you use it as a motivator and you say, I wish I could feel that excitement. I once had a person came over to me and says, can I take conversion courses? I never really gave a conversion course. I used to learn with all the converts in our shul, the potential converts. I would learn with them one-on-one. But they said, can I learn? I want to learn for conversion. I'm thinking, I know your parents. You were brought up religious. Like, what are you talking about? You want to learn for conversion? Yeah, because I want to feel some of those things that they're feeling. I want to be able to get some of that excitement and some of that enthusiasm, some of that fire for Torah. I want some of that also. That's one way of looking at it. But the other way, unfortunately, of looking at it is that I need to justify why I don't do it. And therefore, says Rashi, what's the third step? Moes ba'acherim ha'osim. You start to feel uncomfortable with the people that are actually keeping mitzvahs. And you start to come up with names, Meshuggah Frum. They're over the edge, they're fanatics. You can call them the worst thing that you could possibly call a religious Jew, Haredi, right? You just look at them and you start to knock them down because it's starting to feel a little compelling. It's starting to feel a little bit like there's an expectation for you, and the only way to deal with that, unless you embrace it, the only way to deal with it is to reject it. We've spoken about this concept many times. Esav, when he gave away his firstbornship, the Torah tells us that Esav hated. He hated the firstbornship, and the reason they had to do that is because he realized that he had given away something so valuable, and the only way that he could justify himself, the only way that he could live with himself, was to say, I hated it because it was terrible. And then he's not a bad person. He's not a person who squandered an incredible gift that God gave him, because it wasn't a gift anyway. It wasn't that important. And we sometimes need to do that when we see people around us growing in their Torah, and we don't have the strength or energy or desire to grow. So then very often what we do is we push that down. Moes ba'acherim ha'osim. Well, Rashi tells us, the Torah tells us, that it doesn't just stop there. Because you're still my friend. And I tell you, I think you're being a fanatic. And I don't know why you need to do that and why you need, but okay. But then you start to resent Sonei Esachachamim, you start to resent the rabbis. Because it's those rabbis that are making these people crazy. They're brainwashing them. They're taking away their own free thought, and they're pushing them into a direction. And the rabbis have taken this, and they've just gone too far. But when that doesn't help anymore, when that doesn't make you feel any better, says the Torah, says Rashi, you actually have to attempt to stop people from doing it. You have to try to get them to calm down. It's not just anymore just a thought that you're uncomfortable with them doing it, but you're moneya. You become a barricade. You become a blockage for them. Well, when that doesn't work, so then you have to start attacking the mitzvos themselves. Kofer b'mitzvos. Oh, that's not what God meant. That's not the way Judaism is supposed to be. That's not the way the Torah is supposed to be. That's rabbinic Judaism. That's something different. And then when that doesn't calm you down anymore, So then Rashi says, Kaifer Be'ikr. The last step is the Hafrachem is Brisi. The last step is to deny the covenant, to deny God. It's a progression that happens in people. That the need to stop other people from keeping mitzvahs, the need to almost be militant about it, comes from a lack of comfort in oneself, and therefore you feel that they are challenging you. And this is to the one side, that they're challenging you to do more, and when you're not ready to do more, then you have to push that away. By the way, it works the other way also. That when I need to stand in your way, when I need to try to militantly stop you from the things that you do, it's because I see you as a threat to me. I see you as a threat to what I stand for because I'm not strong enough in what I see. We've spoken about this when we've talked about the reformed smoker, that there are people that have stopped smoking, but when they see somebody else smoke, they hack and they cough and they tell them, you're going to kill me, you're going to kill everybody here, why would you do that? And the reason that they have such a militant reaction is because they're not yet done smoking. And because they're not done smoking, the only way that they can protect themselves is by knocking you down and knocking down the smoking, because they don't really care that you're smoking. What they really do care is that they're afraid of themselves getting dragged into that. And therefore they knock you down. This is what I think that Shlomo Melech is telling us. B'ni im yifatucha chatoim. If sinners are going to try to pull you down, and the reason they're going to try to pull you down is because you are compelling to them, is because when they see you, they feel dragged, they feel pulled. There are different types of secular people. There are secular Jews that have no problem with religious Jews. I'm secular, you're religious. Okay, pass the coffee. Like they just have no issues with it. And there are secular Jews that are filled with such hatred to religious Jews and to those that keep mitzvahs that it's hard to even understand where that comes from. So which one of them is in better Jewish shape? I think the haters. Because if you didn't have something burning inside you, you wouldn't hate. If a person tells me the following story, my boss gave me a hard time. I didn't come to work on Yom Kippur, and he gave me a hard time. My first question to that person is, your boss is Jewish, right? Because if your boss wasn't Jewish, your boss would say, oh, Yom Kippur? Oh, yeah, that's amazing. Just tell me what it is. Oh, it's a day of atonement? It's where the Jews sit and they fast and they pray all day? Wow, that sounds so interesting. Because he's not compelled by it. It doesn't drag him. It's not mechayev him. It doesn't obligate him in anything. But when a Jew's here, a Jew that doesn't keep Yom Kippur, a Jew that doesn't keep those mitzvos, and he hears about it, the fire that burns inside of him starts to burn brighter. And if he's not prepared to move forward, if he's not prepared lilmod to learn, and lasos to do the first two steps in this progression, then by definition he needs to take the other tack. And he needs to yifatucha chatoyim. He needs to entice you. He needs to grab you and to try to pull you off, because otherwise he's the fool. The Jew that doesn't care hears about your things and says, great, okay, no problem, I'll see you Monday. Like, it doesn't make a difference to him. That means there's no fire burning inside. That's a much more serious situation. That's a much more difficult and much more dangerous level to be on. On some level, this is not so bad, Yifatucha Chatayim. If he feels it necessary to try to change your mind, that means that there's still hope. There's still a fire there. And then what does Shlomo Melech turn to you and say? Al Tave. He says, don't consent, because the minute that you show him a little bit of desire, you give him a little bit of credence, that's the moment that that fire is going to go out. Because I got you. Once I got you, I don't got to worry about it. Shlomo Melech is telling us that we have to be very, very careful. Yifatucha chatoyim, when people are coming after us, and they will come after us, and the reason they will come after us is because they can't live with their own failure. And therefore, you have to be careful not to play into that. You have to be careful not to give them any kind of credence. Al tovei, do not consent. Now, as Shlomo Melech goes on in the next couple of verses, he tells us exactly what we shouldn't do and what we shouldn't fall prey to. Because understand that when you are being enticed, you never get enticed in one shot. You never get, person doesn't go what's called me'igra rama, lebika amikta. From the upper heights to the lowest of lows, you don't go there in 1 minute. A person doesn't keep mitzvahs for years and then wake up one morning and say, yeah, I'm done. That doesn't happen. A person goes step by step by step by step away. Very often, coming towards mitzvahs, we go too fast. Going away from mitzvahs, usually, we go step by step by step. And that's what Shlomo Melech is going to describe next, that we have to be careful not to get enticed and ensnared, even on the surface, because then that's going to lead one step to the next step. Okay. Again, I hate linking the days to each other, but tomorrow we will continue and finish this section. Okay, everybody should have a beautiful, wonderful.
Awesome, Rabbi. Rabbi, can I just mention two things, please?
Please.
Firstly, when you were describing your early minyanim and the ragtag minyan, how people perceived it, all that is called a frame of reference.
Right. That's right.
That's the general term to describe how different people look at the same phenomenon and come back with completely different conclusions.
That's right. That's right. Thank you.
And lastly, we've mentioned the three yeshiva boys who were assassinated in the Gush Etzion way back when. It's not the first time we mentioned them. I don't know if I ever mentioned that they're actually buried here in Modin.
Right, I've heard that. Yeah, in the regular cemetery in Modi'in.
Yeah, in the regular cemetery, they're next to each other. It's an experience. It's good to see them.
Yeah, I can imagine.
To say the least.
I can imagine. Okay, thank you for sharing. Everybody should have a wonderful, beautiful, amazing day. And in Mitzvah Hashem, we will see you all tomorrow.
Yes. Okay. Awesome, Rabbi. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure. Have a wonderful
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure.
Have a great day, everybody. Bye.